Welcome to Think Like a Lawyer Training with Lexis. I am your fearless leader for your law school journey, Heather Caro, and today I'm here to talk to you about how you can use Lexis to tackle common assignments at your first legal job. Things like how to do research in an area of law that you haven't studied in law school, how to do regulatory research, and how to draft various documents such as pleadings, motions, and complaints. Most of you know me. I'm an attorney in Louisiana, and I've been with Lexis for over 5 years. But before rejoining the Lexis team after law school, I held a 1-year judicial clerkship, during which time I realized how little I knew about the actual practice of law after 3 years in law school. Why did I tell you that? Well, I spent countless hours doing research, reviewing various motions, complaints, and pleadings submitted to the court, and drafting memos. And before that clerkship, I really didn't know that Lexis could simplify the process of completing those tasks and take away some of the stress of not knowing where to start. Lexis is prominent in the legal community and is currently in 94% of the largest law firms, in over 4,000 corporations and 30,000 small law firms, and in many federal and local courts and agencies. Moreover, not only do we support you here at the law school, but we also provide you with unlimited access to your law school ID over the summer and graduate access after graduation, so you can easily use all of the Lexis resources when you start working. To make sure you're ready to practice, Lexis surveyed over 2,500 law students last summer regarding their summer jobs, and through this survey, we identified the 3 most common types of research assignments given to summer interns, new associates, and law clerks. Thus, the goal of today's training is to focus on what is relevant to your summer and practical success. Over the next 15 minutes or so, I'll talk you through these 3 most common types of research assignments. They are, first, writing a memo on an unfamiliar topic or area of the law; second, researching statutes and regulations; and third, drafting complaints. Let's assume you're given a client's file with the following instructions. Your client wants to sue his employer for employment discrimination based on gender because he's more than qualified for the job that he applied for. He's a male nurse, but the employer, the hospital, simply wants a female for the position because of privacy issues. Your supervising attorney just asked you to get up to speed on the matter and then file a complaint. You haven't studied employment discrimination or labor law yet, so what do you do? Once we head over to Lexis Advance, we're going to start with a secondary source, and specifically a treatise that will explain the topic to us and identify key primary sources. One of the great things that's exclusive to Lexis is Matthew Bender treatises. Now, a lot of you have thought, who is this Matthew Bender person and why does Heather talk about him so much? Well, Matthew Bender isn't a person. Rather, it's a collection of treatises that are considered the industry standard and written by experts in the field on about 50 different topics. It's a really great resource to help you get up to speed and learn the black letter law quickly. We know that the case before us is about employment discrimination, so I'm going to go in the search box and type in employment discrimination. And the first thing that you'll notice are our legal phrases and documents that load, but beneath that are the sources. And the first one in our list is Larson on Employment Discrimination, and that is a Matthew Bender treatise. That's really going to help us find what we're looking for. So remember, when adding a filter, you can either click on the black hyperlink to add the source as a filter and search anywhere across that source, or you can come over and click on the blue hyperlink to view the table of contents if you're totally sure of what you're looking for. We have a pretty straightforward search in front of us, so I'm just going to go ahead and click on the black hyperlink to add Larson on Employment Discrimination as a source in our filters. And so here you'll notice that now we're only going to look for our specific key terms in that source that we've added as a filter. So because we found a treatise on point, Larson, we just need to come up with search terms. The issue that our client is suing for is being discriminated against based on his gender because he was qualified for the position that he applied for. However, the hospital simply wanted a female. So let's go ahead and search sex or gender or qual. All right, and you may have noticed that I put an exclamation point at the end of qual, and that is considered a connector, and it can be added to the root of any word to ensure that your results include every variation of the root word searched. So therefore, in my search, adding the exclamation point at the end of qual is me saying that I want the terms qualifying, qualified, qualification, etc., to be in my list of results without me actually typing out all of those relevant terms. So let's go ahead and run that search. Now, as I go through my results that are automatically sorted by relevance, you'll notice that the fourth result is right on point. It discusses sex discrimination topics, bona fide occupational qualifications. And that's perfect. That's exactly what we need because bona fide occupational qualifications are a defense to acknowledge discrimination. Essentially, it's a rule that allows for the hiring of individuals based on race, sex, age, and national origin. So I'm going to go ahead and open up that section, and you'll notice that it's very easy for us to quickly find what we're looking for because all of our terms are highlighted throughout the treatise. So very quickly, if I get down to the third section, section B, you'll notice that it talks about nurses and bona fide occupational qualifications as they relate to a nurse's gender. This is the reason that you start with secondary sources. It's going to tell you exactly what the law is, but in layman's terms. Also, the footnotes are going to link us to primary law that we can use to back up our argument. But before jumping out to any primary authority, we would read through this treatise section and you would see that it's telling us that there is a bona fide occupational qualification for nurses to be a specific sex for privacy reasons, or essentially that a bona fide occupational qualification that can be used by hospitals when hiring orderlies and nurses is sex, meaning that the hospital may have been within its rights to discriminate against our client for this specific position. Before moving on, let's highlight this section and put it in a folder so that we can come back to this in case we have to explain our argument later. So once we highlight that text, we will click on Add to Folder, and then we can put this in our Employment Discrimination folder and easily be able to access that later. So once you understand what the law is, then you can use this treatise section to link to the primary law. So I'm going to use the footnotes to link into the cases that are cited in this secondary source. So if you click on that little drop-down menu next to any section of the treatise, it'll bring us into the primary law that they're citing to. All right, and here are the cases on point that I can now read to better understand the law affecting my case. But before we move on to the next part of our research, a quick recap of what we've done thus far. When researching an area of law in which you are not familiar, first you should either go to a specific source from that area of the law or run a search and immediately go to the Secondary Materials tab to look for treatises that discuss your specific issue. Then once you find a section on point, read it to better understand what you're researching, and then use the footnotes from that secondary source to branch out to primary authority. So while looking through these footnotes, you may have also noticed that there were some cites directly to a regulation that is on point with our issue. And that takes us to the second focus of this training, conducting statutory and regulatory research. The good news is that such research is actually pretty easy on Lexis once you understand just a couple of basic things. So the acronym that you need to remember for statutory and regulatory research is SRAC, which is similar to the IRAC method that you already learned in your legal research and writing class. All right, so now we're going to break down what that acronym stands for. So SRAC. S stands for statute. So first, retrieve the statute in question, read the text of that statute, and then look at the annotations. The R is for regulations. So then we're going to find any regulations that have been promulgated under the statute. And regulations are simply rules that are created by agencies, but they have the same force as statutes. The next letter, the A, stands for administrative materials. So we want to find any relevant agency decisions or administrative guidelines. What are agencies? Basically, Congress wants to make sure that we had clean drinking water, so it created the EPA. They want to make sure that we pay our taxes, so they created the IRS. They want to make sure that there are equal employment opportunities for everyone in the U.S., so they created the EEOC. Those are all agencies. All right, and then the final letter of the acronym is the C, and that stands for cases. And so we want to find cases that interpret and apply the statute, regulations, and administrative materials that we found through that other research that we just did. All right, so the first place that you might find a statute or a regulation is directly in the footnotes of the secondary source that you use to first understand your issue. However, if you aren't so lucky and you don't find anything there, you can focus on 3 specific tabs that we're now going to go through using the acronym that we just reviewed. Let's go back to Lexis and run a search across everything with our original key terms. And then we're going to focus on the Statutes and Legislation tab. Once we get those results, we'll want to focus down on a few filters, and the first one is, let's focus down to codes, specifically from our practice area. And so remember, we were looking at labor and employment law, and so now we have all the statutes and legislation specifically relevant to our key terms coming from our area of law. And you'll notice the very one up at the top specifically deals with unlawful employment practices. So let's go ahead and open that one up. All right, so the first thing that you would want to do is familiarize yourself with the plain language of the statute. Then, once you understand that, we can go down to the case notes and understand how this statute has been applied. To get to those case notes, the easiest way would be to come up to the top of the screen and the Go To drop-down menu and select Case Notes. So the case notes are essentially found beneath the text of the statute, and they're organized for you in an outline format. So these headings are essentially hashtags for the cases that have cited to the statute, and they're letting you know specifically which section of the statute they're applying. So if we scroll down about halfway through that outline, you'll notice that there are a ton of cases that have cited to this statute. There's a section dedicated to defenses to alleged violations, and then a section specifically dedicated to bona fide occupational qualifications. So if you want to look at the cases that are actually applying that specific language of the statute, we can go ahead and click on that little blue drop-down arrow, and we'll be able to view all of the cases applying that text. So now we've found the statute that's in question, along with the most important cases that interpret and apply that statute. So in addition to all of these cases listed here, we also need to turn to other sources to argue our case, which includes regulations. And so that brings us to the second step in the SRAC process, finding the regulations promulgated under the statute. So federal agencies such as the EEOC have been given the power to create rules that help clarify, define, and carry out statutory schemes. These rules or regulations are published chronologically in the Federal Register and topically in the Code of Federal Regulations, which are housed in the Administrative Codes and Regulations tab. So let's click on Results List to get back to our original set of results, and then we're going to want to click on Administrative Codes and Regulations. From there, if we scroll down into our filters, I'm going to narrow it down to a U.S. federal jurisdiction, and you don't have to do that, but I just did it so that you can see the Federal Register and the Code of Federal Regulations side by side. So if you'll notice, the second result in our list, the title of section 1604.2 is Sex as a Bona Fide Occupational Qualification. So once again, right on point. Let's go ahead and open up that section. And just as we looked at that statute, we need to first read through the regulation and then understand it. Then once we understand it, we'll have to shepherdize it. And so you're probably thinking, I have to shepherdize a regulation? Yes, because just like Shepard's is the industry standard for case law, it's also the standard for regulatory research. So now that I've opened up my regulation and I've read through it, now I can click on Shepherdize this document to go to my Shepard's report. A Shepard's report for a regulation works just like a Shepard's report for anything else. It tells you if your rule is good law or bad law and how courts have treated it. A Shepard's report for an agency rule looks a lot like a Shepard's report for a statute because it has the same force of law. So you have your legislative history tab, your citing decisions tab, and your other citing sources tab. The legislative history tab will show us exactly where this regulation was born in the Federal Register. Our Citing Decisions tab will show me all the cases that have cited to this rule and how it's been treated. And my Other Citing Sources tab will show me additional authority, including its statutory authority and secondary sources that have cited to it, so that I can really understand it. The Citing Decisions tab shows me cases that have cited to my regulation and how it's been treated. As we can see up here at the top, there are 70 decisions that have cited to it, but I really only care about the ones that are from my jurisdiction. So I'm going to go ahead and under courts filter down to the 11th Circuit, so the only 3 cases that are binding on me. And the one thing, if you read through them, you would notice is that none of them are relevant. Of those 3 cases, none of them have dealt with the issue of nurses, so it could be a good thing for our client and his case might not totally be dead. The last part of Step 2 of the R in SRAC is to look at the Federal Register, and that's different from the Code of Federal Regulations. The Federal Register is a book where agencies put new rules or rules that they're proposing changes to give the public a chance to make comments on them. They have to go into the Federal Register for typically about 30 days for a period of what's called notice and comment on anything that they're going to change or make new. So to be really thorough in your regulatory research, you want to find your regulation, but then check the Federal Register for the previous 2 months or so to make sure that there aren't any new proposed changes. This brings us to the third step in SRAC, finding administrative materials, including agency decisions or guidelines that will help clarify, interpret, and apply the statute and regulations that we found. So let's click on Administrative Materials. And then specifically in this case, we want to look at decisions from the EEOC. So under Agency Filter, we can click on EEOC, and that will provide us with a number of different sources from the EEOC. So we're looking at their decisions, digests, directives, press releases, and even enforcement guidance. So all of these would lead us to a better understanding of how the EEOC treats a claim of discrimination on the basis of gender discrimination and bona fide occupational qualifications. So finally, that will bring us to the last step in the SRAC process, finding cases. So we've already found a number of cases by viewing case notes and annotations from statutes. Remember, we Shepardized the regulation, which led us to a ton of case law there. And then we can very easily find other cases on this topic by selecting the Cases tab and then narrowing it down to cases from our jurisdiction. All right, so a quick recap of conducting statutory and regulatory research on Lexis Advance. Remember to use the acronym SRAC. So first, find statutes that are in question and then read the text of it and refer to the annotations to see how those statutes have been applied. Then for the R, look for regulations that have been promulgated under the statute. Third, we're going to look for administrative materials, so we need to find relevant agency decisions or administrative guidelines dealing with our issue. And then finally, the C, we need to find cases that have interpreted and applied the statute, regulations, or other administrative materials that we found through that process. Well, now we're almost done with the assignment we were given, but we still have one last thing that we have to do before our research is complete. The last thing our supervising attorney asked us to do was file a complaint. And remember, that's the third most requested task from the survey taken last summer. You might not even realize this, but with Lexis Advance, you have access to thousands of forms from our extensive collection. And those forms are all continuously updated and logically organized. So to access a sample complaint for this client, let's click on Briefs, Pleadings, and Motions. And if we scroll down, we want to narrow it down to just pleadings. The second one in the list, you'll notice, is clearly labeled complaint. So let's go ahead and open that one. And this is an excellent example for you because if you read it, you'll see it discusses gender discrimination and the qualifications of that applicant, so you can model your own complaint accordingly. If you want just not only content help, but also some formatting help, you can come over here to the About This Document box and click on Original Source Document, and that will show us the actual document that was submitted to the court, and that shows us exactly what our complaint should look like. And it's just that easy to find a sample complaint to model your own after on Lexis Advance. You should now feel confident that you can complete the tasks most commonly asked of summer associates. First, you know how to research an unfamiliar area of law by using great treatises on Lexis. Second, you can succinctly find and understand the application of statutes and the corresponding regulations by using the case notes and other editorial enhancements provided on Lexis. And third, you know how to draft a document using sample documents and forms on Lexis. Knowing how to complete these tasks efficiently will help you be better prepared for the practice of law so that you can be amongst the 5% of law school graduates who have the practical skills needed to carry out their work. And last but not least, never be afraid to seek help. Lexis's job is to make your job easier and you more efficient. Lexis offers you a lot of different ways to get support when you need it. Under the More section on Lexis Advance, you can access our live support and chat feature. You can also contact our Lexis customer support at 1-800-45-LEXIS. Phone support is available 24/7, so definitely don't hesitate reaching out to a real person who is an experienced researcher who knows what they're doing and can help you in an instant. And of course, you can always get my contact info from the Lexis for Law School's homepage or reach out to the Lexis representative at your place of employment because yes, likely they'll have one too. I look forward to seeing you around campus.